In the area I grew up, they told me I wasn't going to be anything.
Driven to achieve and overcome, Evander Real Deal Holyfield willed himself to greatness.
He reminds me of a true gladiator, a true warrior.
Holyfield showed us that monsters do not exist.
Grounded in faith, Holyfield's spirituality strengthened and tested him.
His sexual immorality. That's probably the biggest crippling thing in his life.
Holyfield said to me, I'm going to show Mike Tyson my God's more powerful than his God.
All of these competitive juices that made him great now make him potentially a tragic figure.
What made Evander Holyfield such an amazing boxer is the fact that no matter who he fought, no matter what the challenge was, the fans were guaranteed an exciting fight.
Here comes Holyfield, doubling the left, unloading his arsenal of punches.
You didn't sit down without chills for 1 second when Evander was fighting.
He was a pit bull in the ring. His aggressiveness, his relentlessness were all parts of the package that Evander Holyfield brought in the ring.
Almost no fighter of the last 30 years has had as complete an offensive arsenal as Evander Holyfield.
One of the great things about Evander, he has a chin of stone. You can hit him with a sledgehammer. He's not going down that easy.
When you hit him, you touched the very heart and soul of Evander. Holyfield's pleasure was getting down and saying, okay, I can take yours, can you take mine now?
Most fighters try to camouflage their fear. He had none.
He reminds me of a true gladiator, a true warrior, blood, sweat, and tears. That's Evander Holyfield.
Come on, guys. Holyfield in trouble. Hanging on for his life.
Bo beat the hell out of Holyfield. He beat the life out of him, and another life jumped back in it. I'm like, there's got to be a ghost in this building somewhere. How's that man still standing up?
Holyfield was 1 punch away at a couple different times from going down, and now he comes back with a big uppercut, and Bo is in some trouble.
The second fight with Mike Tyson, I don't think I've ever seen anything more courageous than Evander Holyfield with a half-moon shaped thing out of his ear, the blood running down his face, yelling at his corner, give me the mouthpiece, I'm gonna knock him out.
When he came back to fight Ray Mercer and got cut at one point in that fight, when the doctor came in and said, you know, are you okay? Do you want to continue? Evander gave him a look like, are you out of your mind? Do you know? And as if to say, do you know who you're talking to?
He was a black Rocky Balboa. He was the guy that you could pull for because you knew that he had all these different challenges, all these different issues to overcome, and he did it time and time again.
Major among those challenges was the difference between Holyfield and his larger opponents in an era when many pundits of the sweet science had lost their sense of proportion, when bigger was often considered better. He is the only heavyweight to have won the title 4 times.
Evander Holyfield was the little big man who could. Everybody felt he wasn't quite good enough, he wasn't quite big enough, he wasn't quite strong enough, and that was the fuel that drove his engine.
Let them say what they want about him being too small. We knew one thing: they could never take his heart away from him. And I think that was the biggest asset he had, his heart.
His strength, I think, came from a different place. And part of the reason why we underestimated him is because we couldn't see that place. And that was really the soul of a great fighter and a person who knew what he wanted out of life. He refused to cave into our expectations of him.
Holyfield challenged our view of what a heavyweight was in many ways. First of all, he really wasn't a knockout fighter. And then he brought this demeanor that was the antithesis of Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson talked about crushing your brain, and, well, Evander was just gonna pray for you and just try to beat you and move on.
If you hit that, I'm gonna step this way, then I'm gonna come back. And you like that, but you got it. Then I kick it that way.
There's no pretense. There's nothing phony about him. A guy who walks around without an entourage. He is always going to be the guy who grew up in Atlanta with nothing and trying to become something.
I think Evander, no matter how many millions he has made, still believes he's going to go to the refrigerator and find it empty. And that paranoia has driven a lot of what he's accomplished in life.
Here's a guy, got enough money to air condition hell. You know, he can go to Neiman Marcus, Burberry's, wherever he wanted to shop at. This guy goes to Kmart to shop.
Evander Holyfield was a little bit of a paradox. You have this huge house, it's like the Coliseum of Atlanta, but he was also very humble.
I had asked him, you know, why are you building such a huge joint? He said, well, you know, the Rockefellers got their spot, Elvis got his spot. I want to build something for my family.
Certainly Evander's home, I think, was in a sense built as a monument unto himself. While he appeared to be very humble, Evander probably also has the largest ego of any athlete I've ever met. And I don't say that in a derogatory way. For Evander Holyfield, that is what drives him. He wants to go where people don't think he can go as an athlete and as a person.
If, God forbid, you went bowling with him, he would not let you leave if you won a game. If you won a game, he would have to bowl another one and beat you and remind you who won.
He's on this show, Dancing with the Stars, and he finally gets eliminated. I said, well, did you have fun? No, I lost. And he was, I'm telling you, as distraught and disheartened as I'd ever seen him after a fight, ever.
One of Evander's friends once told me that he perceives himself as Mr. Perfect, and when he's unable to sustain that self-image, he gets down on himself. And maybe that perfectionism is what drove him to become heavyweight champion in the face of all odds.
The youngest of 9, Evander Holyfield, was just 4 when his mother, Annie, relocated her family from rural Alabama to the Summerhill section of Atlanta in 1967.
Evander's mother was a tremendous influence in his life. A single mom, working very hard, and I think he saw that as example. You can get what you want if you're willing to put the work in.
I truly believe all that I am today is because of my mother, how she inspired me, how she stayed on me, how she just structured me. My mother was my hero.
Growing up, he always said that if he ever did something, his mom would bust him up. He realized that his mom wanted him to follow a straight and narrow path.
Only thing that I wanted to do is make my mama happy. I'm the one that got 3 whoopings a day. I was always in trouble. I was a classroom clown. I wanted some attention. I wanted to be loved, but, you know, but I was going about the wrong way to do it.
Not having known his natural father until he was 21, Holyfield sought paternal recognition on Atlanta's playing fields.
My whole life, I was inspired by men because my daddy wasn't there. So when I went out and played sports, I played so hard for the coaches because I wanted them to pat me on my back.
The Warren Memorial Boys Club provided an opportunity for the athletic Holyfield to gain approval and a sense of purpose. At age 8, the boy who harbored dreams of playing for the Atlanta Falcons became seduced by another sport.
The thing that sort of enthralled him was the speed bag, the sound of the speed bag.
He asked the coach there, Carter Morgan, if he could hit the speed bag, and the coach told him that was only for kids who were on the boxing team, and if he wanted to hit it, he could join the boxing team.
Carter Morgan was a father figure. He was the type of man that every child would want in their life in terms of giving you good advice, but yet loving you the way a man should love, a son.
In the area I grew up, they told me I wasn't going to be anything. The only person that ever told me that I could really be something was my mama. And the second person was that white man, Carter Morgan.
Carter Morgan said to him, "One day, son, you're going to be a champion." And from that day on, that stayed with him. And that little engine that could, called Evander Holyfield, went on that one-track mind to become a champion.
Undefeated in his first 3 years in the ring, Holyfield fought a tough kid named Cecil Collins and suffered his first loss. When the 11-year-old told his mother his boxing career was over, she had a powerful response.
She told him in no uncertain terms that he's not quitting the boxing team, and that she didn't raise a quitter, and that if he wants to stop boxing, he can stop, but he's going to stop after he beats Cecil Collins or never.
And wouldn't you know it, he had a second fight with Cecil Collins. And he lost again. And he went home and said, "I quit." And she said, "You won't quit."
A few months later, he fought that same young man again, and he beat him. And he went running home to tell his mom, and she looked at him, she said, "Now you can quit." And he's like, "I don't want to quit."
He fought on, learning his craft and piling up victories. When he was 16, Holyfield lost his coach and father figure, Carter Morgan, to emphysema. Then, after winning a silver medal at the 1983 Pan Am Games, Holyfield twice defeated world amateur champion Ricky Womack to earn a spot on the 1984 U.S. Olympic team.
When the Olympics began, he was knocking out everybody he fought. Bang, bang, bang. 3 straight knockouts.
In the semifinals, Holyfield faced Kevin Barry of New Zealand.
Look at Holyfield. He's ready. He's got the opponent hurt again. He's ready to put him away.
Comes a moment right before the bell of the second round, and he clocks Barry and knocks him out.
Oh, there it goes. You saw that. It was inevitable. Now, wait a minute.
Now, the Yugoslav referee does an interesting thing. He waves Holyfield over to the corner. He counts out Barry, knockout. He then turns to Holyfield and disqualifies him for having hit on a voice signal stop.
He is going to disqualify Evander Holyfield.
If you throwing a punch and the referee say break at the same time, you can't stop.
He got jerked out of a gold medal. Everybody on God's green earth realized, and knows that he won that fight.
Look at Holyfield's face. What an untoward development.
After he was disqualified, I didn't know exactly how he would react. He took it with such grace and class that it was almost unbelievable. That's when I marked him as somebody special.
The Yugoslavian fighter who actually got the benefit of this bizarre decision to disqualify Holyfield simply turned to Holyfield, who was standing several inches below him on the bronze medal stand, and asked him to come up with him on the top platform. It's certainly one of the great Olympic moments in modern times.
In an ironic way, that disqualification made everybody notice who Evander Holyfield was. And it really, in the long run, helped create Evander's turning pro and the mystique around him.
I don't think the boxing community at large has given Evander enough credit for the total package that he brought to the ring. I don't think he's been respected as a boxer who defined his time.
3 months after the 1984 Olympics, Evander Holyfield turned pro and made an immediate impact in the cruiserweight division.
In his 12th professional fight, he was fighting for the world title against Dwight Cowie, a former prison inmate. I mean, if you looked up the definition of tough in the dictionary, there's a picture of Dwight Cowie's mug right there.
That fight was war. It was like life and death every round.
Evander has to defend himself
I expected him to be real fast and coming out. But the one thing I didn't expect is him to go the distance like X anybody. Anybody to see that fight, they get tired when you watch it.
That particular fight showed me beyond the shadow of a doubt what reservoir of strength and belief that this guy had.
For the winner and new junior Evander Holyfield!
Evander was so dehydrated after that fight, he was admitted to the hospital to keep giving him parenteral fluids. They were even worried about his kidney shutting down.
I remember telling my manager at the time, look, I don't think I want to be champion no more. He said, what you mean? I said, man, I almost died in that doggone ring.
Despite the punishment, Holyfield wanted more fights and bigger paydays. With an 18-0 record in 1988, the undisputed cruiserweight champion was ready to declare himself a heavyweight. But at less than 200 pounds, he would first have to gain strength and bulk to compete effectively.
It became what they called the Omega Project, to create this guy from a cruiserweight into a heavyweight, and he went on an intensive training program.
I was trying to find ways to train the heart rate and start putting some muscle on him. And over a course of a couple of years, I put about 30 pounds on him that was legitimate. It wasn't steroids, it wasn't drugs.
He was always considered the little engine that could, but still people couldn't believe that this little engine was actually doing what he was doing. So then you had the steroid thing come up.
Evander told me one time he thought it would be cheating to do something like that, but he was so driven to be the best that you just don't know what a man's capable of sometimes.
The fraternity, composed of writers, managers, and trainers, skeptically call him just a blown-up cruiserweight. He comes to what might best be called a crossroad fight against Michael Dokes. Evander drove Michael Dokes, former heavyweight champion, across the ring and ended the fight. He still had the naysayers, but to himself he had proven that he belonged in the heavyweight division.
I had a great quote which George Benton, Holyfield's trainer, had given to me about the fact that nobody really appreciated his heavyweight. And he said, I'm giving them classical music and all they want is rap. And he's talking about Tyson. The public's appetite at that point was for everything Tyson.
When Mike Tyson shocked the world by losing his crown to Buster Douglas in February of 1990, Holyfield was next in line for the new title holder. And that October, the fighter who was told he was going nowhere fought for the championship of the world.
Douglas was trying to take him out, but Holyfield boxed the hell out of it, you know, with the left hand, making him pay.
And then all of a sudden, bam, crushing right hand. And at first, I just say, oh, he's getting up. I know he's gonna get up. And then I'm watching the referee 7, 8, 9.
There's a new heavyweight champion of the world, and his name is Evander Holyfield.
As spectacular as Holyfield's one-punch knockout of Buster Douglas was, it really didn't convince anybody that he was the real heavyweight champion.
They were disrespected me because I didn't beat Tyson, but I didn't have nothing to do with Tyson losing this Buster Douglas. It was some kind of way they were trying to rob me of this 20-year goal.
The first reign of Evander Holyfield was really a very tough one for him because he was stuck in no-win fights. He fights George Foreman, who's 87 years old, and he beats him. Then he fights Bert Cooper, gets knocked down, goes on and wins. Then he fights Larry Holmes, who's 67 years old. He beats him, doesn't look particularly good doing it, doesn't knock him out.
The prerequisite for fighting a nondescript champion like Holyfield is you have to be over 40 and you have to be a drunk, a derelict, or a drug addict. You know what I mean? That's the only way you can fight Holyfield. He's a loser.
Holyfield once told me that he felt like Charlie Brown, and by that he meant it was always raining on him. I think Evander kind of felt, why is everybody picking on me?
The big test came in November of 1992 when the 6'2", 205-pound Holyfield met undefeated Riddick Bowe, who was 3 inches taller and 30 pounds heavier.
He thought that Bowe was soft and that he could jump in his face and through his great will, persistence, and stamina, break him down. He was wrong.
Bowe is really going after him.
Evander, on paper, shouldn't have been able to compete with Riddick, and yet he had one of the greatest wars of all time with Riddick Bowe in that first fight.
Another right, and another.
For all his courage, speed, and agility, Holyfield lost his title to Bowe by unanimous decision. Battered and drained, the 30-year-old perfectionist said he was retiring, not knowing that he was on the brink of acceptance.
I don't think that Evander Holyfield got the true respect that he deserved as a heavyweight until he lost against Riddick Bowe.
In June of 1993, a refreshed Holyfield returned to the ring, his mission to regain the crown. After defeating Alex Stewart, he met Bowe in November in Las Vegas. In the 7th round, the specter of Charlie Brown revisited Holyfield when an unscheduled visitor rained on his comeback.
A parachutist mysteriously came out of the sky at 1 minute and 10 seconds of the 7th round. That caused a 21-minute delay in the fight.
I remember it being a fascinating fight on some level, but really the only thing that stands out to me is Fan Man, which is a complete and utter disservice to Evander Holyfield.
They went 21 minutes standing there in the cold, and then he had to start all over again and never lost his focus, closed the deal, and won the fight.
The fact that he was able to box and minimize the exchanges in the second fight, that showed really what a great fighter he was, because he was able to make the adjustment even though it was against his very nature. That, to me, is the greatest moment of his career.
I don't think anything gave Evander as much happiness as beating somebody who the whole world said he couldn't beat, especially after he beat Bowe. That, see, there, I showed you, I could do it. That drove him incredibly.
The Lord is good, and he's good all the time. He makes a way out of no way.
I think the role of religion with Evander was the lifesaver in the middle of an ocean when it needed to be. I think it was a buoy, you know, that was floating there to grab onto and pull him where he had to be pulled when he was in tough situations.
It's the most important thing in his life, you know, because his mother instilled that in him from the time he could walk and talk.
All of your life you've been told in terms of your pursuit of what you're trying to do that you can't do. And yet there's a scripture that he wore on his trunk. Philippians 4:13 says, I can do all things through Christ that strengthen me.
He has genuinely believed through his career that he was on a mission that was bigger than just boxing. That particular belief propelled and inspired him to reach his potential and then to go way beyond that.
I thank God for allowing me to be a vessel. Thank God for allowing me to change the world with this fight.
I bear witness there's one God, and I bear witness that Prophet Muhammad is the prophet of God.
Holyfield said to me, I'll tell you what this fight's about. I said, what's it about? He said, I'm gonna show Mike Tyson my God's more powerful than his God.
One thing in life I want you all to know, you can count me out, but I believe in Jesus. Because I believe in Jesus, I can get over things.
Early this morning in Atlanta, 35-year-old Willie Holyfield was shot and killed in his home. Willie Holyfield is the older brother of Evander Holyfield, the world heavyweight champion.
In 1996, 4 years after the murder of his brother Willie, Holyfield's mother Annie died from injuries sustained in a car accident. Then, in 1998, his brother James was sentenced to life in prison for rape and child molestation.
I've seen him endure more things than most human beings can endure. If he didn't have the faith
that he has, I mean, he'd probably be a basket case with all the problems he done had.
All more thus far. Evander bleeding, holding on.
After Holyfield lost his title to Michael Moore in April of 1994, he was hospitalized and diagnosed with a serious heart ailment, a non-compliant left ventricle.
I'd like to thank the Lord for letting me have 23 years of this boxing career.
I think Evander, in his heart, so to speak, never really felt like he was finished. And certainly he never wanted his career to end that way.
When medical science failed him, he was going to what he considered to be a higher authority. And was caught up in this very charismatic man and his charismatic mission.
Emotionally at sea, Holyfield fought back by praying and attending revivals led by faith healer Benny Hinn.
Then he spoke, do you believe that God can heal you? And Evander said, yeah. He said, do you want to be healed? And Evander said, yeah. So he had him to come up on stage, and Evander was slain in the spirit.
I went to the Benny Hinn thing, and he said, hey, your heart is healed. Go back to the doctor and tell him to check it out.
As it turned out, the heart ailment that he supposedly had was somewhat misdiagnosed because in the emergency room after the fight, he had been overhydrated and overdrugged with too many painkillers.
There is no question that Evander had abnormalities of his heart shortly after the Michael Moore fight. How they got better, how they improved, I don't have the answer.
Whether Hinn healed Holyfield's heart, he undoubtedly influenced his love life by introducing him to his second wife, Janice Itzen. A bachelor since his first marriage ended after 6 years in 1991, Holyfield was struck by Itzen's spiritual knowledge.
I thought because she knew the Word of God and she knew more about the Word of God than me, then this got to be a perfect fit. Because God would want me somebody who know the Word of God. But I wasn't in love with her.
Holyfield basically came home on a weekend while he was training for a fight in Houston and said, let's get married. And they ended up getting married by a justice of the peace with Holyfield's son standing up as the best man, and their wedding dinner was at Shoney's.
In September of 1998, a week after the birth of the couple's first child, it was revealed publicly that Holyfield had fathered 5 children out of wedlock, including 2 in the previous year, with 4 different women. Evander and Janice divorced in 2000.
Well, I said to him one time, you must be reading the Reader's Digest version of the Bible. There's like a whole sections in there that, somehow appear to be missing.
Lennox Lewis really put him on the spot. Lennox said, well, he is a hypocrite. He said, I'm not going to question his faith, but he breaks a commandment every 10 seconds.
In a few instances, he did not avoid the temptation, and as he said, he was weak and made mistakes and did things that he wished he hadn't done.
Is sexual immorality. That's probably the biggest crippling thing in his life. He's even made the comment, if I was as disciplined in my relationships as I have been in training, I probably wouldn't have all the problems that I have.
Now, I said, Evander, how can you justify being the strong Christian and at the same time have all of these illegitimate children? And his response was, looking at me in disbelief, why take care of them?
He's been responsible for his children, financially, emotionally, parentally.
Evander has this idea that I grew up without a father, and I don't want my kids to feel that. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to be actively involved and try to share with them the things that I think I missed out on.
His faith in God is real. Who he is real. Is he perfect? No. Has he done things that go against God's word? Yes.
He had his failings. There were times Evander tried to make the religion fit what he wanted rather than the other way around, and I think that was a real inner struggle for Evander Holyfield.
Although he was very faithful to his religious beliefs, there are things percolating underneath the surface that have a lot to do with the absence of the father, and that have a lot to do with self-esteem issues, that have a lot to do with people telling you all your life you're not going to be anything. And that's got to come out somewhere. That stuff doesn't just sit quietly inside you.
Evander Holyfield always wanted to fight Mike Tyson. He wanted to fight Tyson, I think, more than he wanted to breathe.
Mike Tyson became the gold standard for boxers in the ring, one that struck fear in most fighters. You see the other guys stand there and almost wet their pants. I mean, he would win most fights before the opening bell. Evander Holyfield never feared Mike Tyson.
He was actually signed to fight Tyson before Tyson fought Buster Douglas. And then when Douglas knocked out Tyson, then Evander got the Douglas fight.
After he'd beaten Buster Douglas and disposed of 42-year-old George Foreman, Evander Holyfield prepared to fight Mike Tyson. But 3 weeks before they were to meet in November of 1991, Tyson withdrew, claiming he had suffered a ribcage injury. Before the fight was rescheduled, Tyson was convicted of rape and sent to prison.
He knew he had to beat Tyson. I guarantee you that until Mike got out of jail, Evander was haunted by that. He was tormented.
When I was training Evander for the second fight with Riddick Bowe, he says, you know, Emmanuel, I sure hate that Mike is locked up because everybody's so afraid of Mike. Then he said, that's the one fight I want more than anything.
Holyfield had his reasons. During the 1984 Olympic training camp, he volunteered to spar with the younger but heavier Tyson, who was an alternate on the squad.
They had a war, and the coach had to break it up to keep two of his best fighters from getting hurt.
Mike was the guy that all of them feared. I wasn't afraid to talk to him, and everything was kind of cordial with me and him, and wasn't nothing to be afraid of.
They were shooting pool. Evander Holyfield was waiting his turn. Mike Tyson was cleaning up on all the other guys, and eventually Tyson got beaten on the table, and he decided he wasn't going to give up the cue stick. And eventually Evander convinced him it would be the smart thing to do.
Those right there were encounters that he knew when the pressure was on that he wasn't going to quit, Mike was going to quit.
Holyfield and Tyson had a big press conference in New York before the fight that never happened. And afterward, HBO's cameras took them and recorded a little face-to-face. I snuck back and watched. The two of them walked up to each other, stood face-to-face, and both of them instantly started laughing. They couldn't do it. It was like two friends. It was like two brothers who just couldn't fake the animosity.
5 years later, in November of 1996, they met in the ring. Tyson, released from prison after 3 years, had won back the WBA heavyweight title. Holyfield had lost to Bowe in their third match.
Evander's career in the ring wasn't going as we had hoped, and that was a setback. But it set up the opportunity for a comeback, because that's how we were able to persuade Don King to put Tyson in there with Evander, because King was certain that Evander was shot.
Evander's a 25-1 underdog. There were a lot of people paranoid that Tyson was really seriously going to physically hurt Evander in the fight.
Bell rings round one, Tyson flies out of the corner, and within the first 3 seconds, he buckles Evander's knees with a hard right that I'm telling you, I and everyone else thought that fight was over. Evander straightened himself, hit Tyson back.
At the end of that first round, Tyson hit Holyfield after the bell. The referee jumped between him, and Holyfield went right over him and threw a punch back. And he said something to Tyson.
And Tyson's eyes just widened to saucer-like eyes. And you knew then and there that fight was over. Yes, it took 10 more rounds, but that fight was over.
One of the things that Evander Holyfield knew about Mike Tyson was that he was not built for a long endurance, war of attrition kind of a fight. And that's what Evander Holyfield was going to give him.
I can fight on the outside, I can fight on the inside, and the only way that Tyson could fight is coming forward, and I wasn't going backwards.
Man, whew, he put some on Mike Tyson. I was surprised he lasted as long as he did. I mean, Evander was hitting him with some shots, man. My toes was curling up, and I'm in the corner.
The announcement of his boxing death had been performed many times. And here he goes smacks Tyson around in the ring, and he proved the critics wrong once again. At that point, I was okay with him putting an S on his chest.
7.5 months later, Holyfield and Tyson met again.
The third round, Tyson came out and threw every piece of arsenal he had at Holyfield. It absolutely did nothing to keep Holyfield away.
Mike just snapped. You know, he was probably pissed off and things weren't going his way.
And all of a sudden, Evander went straight up in the air like a frightened cat. And I went, what the hell was that?
Tyson then spits out the piece of ear. And the piece of ear comes flying across the ring and lands nearby, and you're just like, I cannot believe what I just saw.
I got in the ring. Evander was calm. You could see he was PO'd, but he was calm. And when I said, this is fine, we can fix this, Evander, you go fight, he was comfortable with that.
He hit his ear like this with his glove. And then he said, let's go, let's go.
I came right on him, and when I hit him with a 1-2 and all that, he bit the other one. Because he realized that it wasn't gonna stop me.
Dogs bite because they're scared. They don't bite because they're aggressive. And people do too. He wanted out, O-U-D.
When Holyfield stood up to the bully and chopped him down, you know, he became part of the American legend.
Holyfield showed us that monsters do not exist. They are figments of children's imagination. And if you face something with a righteousness, with a worth, with a preparedness, that you can do almost anything.
I think Evander's legacy will be that he was one of the toughest warriors in the ring who tarnished a great achievement of rising from a light heavyweight, cruiserweight, to a heavyweight champion of the world by overstaying his welcome.
The idea of losing is completely foreign to him, and toward the end of his career, I think served him very poorly.
He's told a number of people, I believe God's plan for me is to finish better than I started, to finish as the undisputed heavyweight champ of the world.
In 1999, Evander Holyfield had 2 opportunities to reach his goal of unifying the heavyweight titles, but he failed in both attempts against WBC champion Lennox Lewis.
Lennox Lewis, too, he fought his heart out that night. He might have left his last touch of that level of fighting in the ring that night.
As Holyfield continued to box, his ring skills began to fade. In October of 2003, 2 weeks before his 41st birthday, he met James Toney, a former cruiserweight who was making his heavyweight debut.
That's kind of signaled the end of Evander Holyfield as a fighter. He didn't have the same snap on his punches. He didn't have the reflexes to block punches.
I told him, you're getting hit with too many right hands. If you don't get out of the way of those right hands, I'm gonna stop the fight. First punch that Tony threw, bam, a right hand.
I think they've thrown in the towel. Don Turner has thrown in the towel, and it's over.
I think Don Turner did him one of the greatest favors a man could do a fighter by stopping that fight with James Toney. Yet, in Evander's eyes, that was almost a betrayal.
After the Toney fight, I told Evander that my opinion was that the best thing for him to do would be retired, because in my view, he was on top.
Evander is not to be denied. You know, in his mind, he can still be the fighter he was in 1990, and you know, he's not going to let a trainer or an advisor or somebody in his camp stand between that.
Holyfield hired a new trainer, and 13 months later he met journeyman Larry Donald, who pounded him as easily as he would the heavy bag, dealing the former champion more than 3 punches for every 1 received. Holyfield was placed on medical suspension by the New York State Athletic Commission and barred from fighting in the United States.
You could see him thinking about punching, but the thought wasn't being delivered from his mind to his hands. If we allowed him to continue fighting, he was going to be one of these guys that was going to suffer from pugilistic dementia. And if we didn't protect him, he didn't want to protect himself.
This was just another case of someone doubting him and someone disrespecting him. And when these episodes occur, it's Evander's style to say, well, I'm going to prove everyone wrong.
Holyfield pressed to be allowed back into the ring. After passing a series of medical tests, the national suspension was changed to a ban in the state of New York. In the summer of 2006, Holyfield, despite just 2 wins in his last 9 fights, got a license to fight in Texas. At 43, he refused to retire.
He still remembers the lesson his mother taught him and his promise to her to finish on top.
When people say, oh, you're too old, you ain't got no youth, this. I could put 2 Corinthians 5:7. I walk by faith, not by sight. Meaning that if I walk by sight, it will make me give up. But faith is evidence of things that are not seen. Because the word of God said, I can be the heavyweight champion of the world again.
It's not gonna happen. You're slurring a little now. Step away. Have respect and dignity for yourself. Don't damage yourself any more than what you have.
He doesn't know when to quit. He doesn't even understand what the word quit means. So all of these competitive juices that made him great now make him potentially a tragic figure.
He still has a goal. People want him to live in the past, but he still has a future. He's not 60 years old. He's not ready to retire. You know, God has given him strength, courage, knowledge, and that's what he's using to continue his life.
However his career ends, Evander Holyfield has established himself as a highly skilled fighter who displayed courage, perseverance, and grace in a sport in search of those attributes.
What kind of career would it have been if nothing ever happened to me and everything was just dandy like that? Who can you really inspire?
Can you think of a fighter who was more underappreciated and underestimated than Evander Holyfield? I mean, Holyfield did what all of us thought was impossible. He became heavyweight champion. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times.
His story is a great story. It's a wonderful story. And it's a story that any kid who is of lesser means, but who has a dream, should hear and understand that they too can live their dream if they have the same kind of character, attitude, and perseverance that Evander Holyfield had.